President Museveni last week wrote to the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, formally tabling Uganda's displeasure and protest over a recommendation to drop Entebbe as a UN regional service center. In the letter sent last week, the president noted as unfair a decision to pick Nairobi over Entebbe to host the world body's regional service center in Africa, even when Uganda and Kenya are friendly neighbors. During a combustible debate yesterday in Parliament, many lawmakers expressed flack against plans to relocate the base. What does this mean within the context of geopolitics, and could this diplomatic tiff with the neighboring state morph into a bigger contestation? On the spotlight is Lumiyaga County MP Theodore Sekikubo, Kira Municipality MP Semuju Ibrahim Ngande, political opponent Joel Bellinson, and Yusuf Serinkuma, a PhD student at Makerere Institute for Social Research. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. We're missing two people, Yusuf and Theodore. I'm sure they'll be joining us shortly. In that introduction, I was talking about the president of this country writing to the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, showing his displeasure because the Entebbe Service Center used to be relocated. We know that the proposal by the UN Secretary General is not final. Can Uganda master a victory against Kenya if this went to a vote? And what are the likely ramifications? If I may begin with you, Joel, because you did international relations from Stanford University.
Well, I don't know enough about how we're going to mobilize the votes for ourselves, but clearly there's a sea change afoot. I mean, they had decided back in 2016 they were going to consolidate from 40 some odd service centers down to 3 or 4. So why not keep it here in Uganda already, since we're so close to all the conflicts, right? 73% of all the operations that the peacekeepers are handling are handled out of the Ugandan office, and Uganda is adjacent to all of them. So why move it to Kenya? It's a very reasonable question to ask. I've read the rationalizations on the other side that because we're landlocked, we're having these extra costs. The countervailing argument being we have lower labor costs. So in the end, is it going to come down to who's in the best graces of the US or China, whoever's pulling the strings on this decision? I don't know what the answer is to that.
There's a view, Honorable Ibrahim, that Kenya is flexing its muscle on the premise of the mutual distrust, especially after Kenya lost the pipeline deal to Tanzania. Is this a plausible view?
I have told, and I even said, because I was the only MP among those who spoke yesterday, that opposed the motion moved by the Honorable Sekikubo, urging government to use all the diplomatic channels so we can keep the UN base. I opposed that motion. And the reason I did so was that first, you must recognize that Nairobi is a regional capital. The last time we visited Kenya, I told colleagues with whom we serve on the Committee on Public Accounts Committee that all the regional centers, not only for the UN, but for the businesses, from banks to telecom companies, they are all headquartered in Nairobi. And there was an extra advantage because people who work in these regional offices, they are paid about $10,000 per month. So if you have 500 people employed by EcoBank, by Airtel, by Taro, so it means you have 500 people paid at $10,000 per month who are part of your economy. What Rwanda has done is to service land and then promise and begin talking to regional centers that if you come to Rwanda, we have an airline that is growing, we will give you service land. They want to attract these region offices. I told the MPs, instead of crying and crying for sympathy, we must make Uganda attractive, because we never participated in a decision that brought the UN here. At that time, the prevailing conditions favored the UN base in Entebbe. They now want to move out. In fact, I told the MPs, amidst a lot of heckling, because they said, we must sound nationalistic. And I said, yes, I want to sound nationalistic. But the issues we must be addressing are not issues of UN relocating, are issues of our own economy. Because the arguments that MPs, including Sechikubo, the move of the motion, were giving was that our hotel industry is going to be affected because you have a lot of UN staff who are sleeping in these hotels, especially around Entebbe. That there are individual businessmen who have put up apartments to attract the UN staff. And at the time I was stopped from making a submission, I wanted to ask the MPs, because you see, at a level of parliament, you must be broader, not sentimental. You have had Etihad Airways closing. Not only were they doing business in Uganda and employing some Ugandans, but they were sleeping in hotels in Entebbe. You have had British Airways closing. Not only were they sleeping in hotels in Entebbe, but they were also employing some local staff. You have had Nakumat closing here. You had Uchumi closing. So you need to ask yourself, why is our economy not as attractive as Nairobi, despite the problems that we share? And that's what you must deal with as a country. When you begin crying that by UN relocating, you are losing about 500 jobs, you're forgetting that you can find those jobs elsewhere.
So your argument is that let it go?
My argument was that we must address the reasons why this base is relocating to Nairobi.
You come from Uganda. You have a saying, Nyamantono.
When you have it,
you have something
yeah,
small.
But when it is not yours,
small, you struggle when it is
when it's not yours, you don't claim it. Because I told Parliament, we never made a resolution for the UN to come here. How can we make a resolution, and how can the president write that please don't go? What are the reasons? If they have told you it is cost effective, because UN is at the moment operates around.
Let me bring this back to Joe. Could it be because of the infrastructure, which seems to be robust in Nairobi, that the Kenyans have built, and that is the advantage, and that is the reason why Uganda is most likely could be losing out?
Well, they certainly have advantages. I mean, number one, it's been 30 years since they had a war, right? More than that, 40, 50, right? Whereas we're like very recently had wars. So we're just rebuilding as a country, compared to Kenya. And our infrastructure lags behind them. The investment and everything is lagging. I mean, you think about like the war in southern Uganda ended in '86, Mau Mau ended in the 50s. So they're already 30 years ahead of us just because of when their war ended. Now, they're unstable now, right? Kenya's, we were very concerned during the election that something horrible would happen. That's a question that the UN should be asking. Is it wise to have it based in Nairobi if Kenya is going to continue to have a risk of serious instability? And comparatively, Uganda is far more stable right now. But infrastructure-wise, I mean, they are now arranging direct flights from Nairobi to New York. That's very convenient for the UN. I mean, we would have to find some way to be able to match that, or some other carrot that would balance that. I think the bigger question is that the UN itself seems to be in a shrinkage mode. And this was obviously the case even before Trump got elected, and because this decision of shrinking the number of facilities was made in 2016, from what I've read. And now the most recent U.S. withholding of funds for the UN, $285 million they're withholding as a result of the Jerusalem vote. And so if history repeats itself, as I tend to believe, when we've talked about this before, I think history moves in cycles. And 80 years ago, the League of Nations was falling apart. That was the forerunner before the United Nations existed. And we're at another situation of global instability. The superpowers that have veto over everything are not all in agreement between Russia, China, and the US. So the probability that the UN is going to become more unstable and have more difficulties funding things is real. And we're obviously caught in the crosshairs of this particular decision, but I think others will come. And I agree with my colleague here that we have to always be focused on what we can do to make ourselves more attractive. And when they're shrinking down basically tenfold from the number of centers down to, what, 3 or 4 now from 40. That's a huge shrinkage. So, I mean, Uganda's strongest argument is that we're in the midst of all of it. UPDF is, the main stabilizing force throughout the region. All of the conflicts are on our doorstep. So it makes sense for us because we're adjacent to it. So in that sense, having everything in Uganda makes more sense for having people that are more aware of the situations versus Kenya, which is more detached from where the current conflicts are. Now, they may be where future horrible conflict is going to be.
Where future horrible conflict could be.
Yeah.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll be joined by Honorable Theodore and I suppose Dr. Yusuf Serunkuma. We'll be right back. Welcome back, gentlemen. We have been joined by Mr. Yusuf Serunkuma and Honorable Theodore Sekikubo, Member of Parliament for Wemiyaga County. Yusuf Serunkuma is a PhD student at Makerere Institute for Social Research. Gentlemen, you're most welcome. If we can continue from where you stopped, I suppose you got a few things before you got the chance to sit here. The image of the Foreign Affairs Minister, or before I can go to that, does Uganda have a robust team of diplomats who can lobby and represent the interests of the country at the time the envoys have been replaced by political cadres, so that they can fight for Uganda's case for this regional base to stay in Entebbe? Honorable Theodore.
Certainly, it is a big concern if you've been following the debate in Parliament. We've been raising concern as members of Parliament as how the career diplomats are being sidelined, where you have people who have variously been losing elections and being posted to the Foreign Office. And really, that has been our undoing. But having said that, Uganda, we've been failing on a number of fronts. Look at the UN. We were the president of the United Nations General Assembly. The 69th president was a Ugandan. But if you follow what track he left behind, what structures, what number of diplomats at the UN did he leave behind, you can't find any to write home about. So we have not built a team like other countries, like Ethiopia. That's why you find Ethiopia, they are beating us. The Kenyans are beating us. The Ghanaians and Nigerians are beating us at the UN level. But to this extent, we shouldn't have lost this opportunity to house the regional resource center at Entebbe, because we still have a country called Uganda. We might have people failing, but we still have a country called Uganda. And that's where we put our emphasis. Where we have the president is the one who has been at the center of the foreign policy of this country. And admittedly, he would have been having a company of people, of diplomats around him. Not only people, but diplomats around him. But we don't seem to see many. Ambassador Ayebare would have been the one to lead the thrust of Uganda, but he could be compared junior to others. But we have the person in the name of the Right Honorable Prime Minister Nduguru Hakanarugunda, who was at the UN. We thought he would be the one to lead the push for Uganda, but apparently has been missing. So when government brought a statement to Parliament yesterday that the Foreign Affairs Ministry has constituted a team, a robust team, you really have reservations. But nonetheless, news trickling in that we have been confirmed that we shall retain the Regional Resource Center at Entebbe is most welcome. And we think we can now, from here, plan the way forward as a country so that we don't have those pitfalls and the threats we had so far suffered. And I hope there we shall be moving forward.
Yusuf, is that the shock therapy that Uganda needed so that we can wake up and do things right?
Well, firstly, I should say there's a lot of fake news going around this story, and I'm very disappointed by the ways in which local media is reporting the story. Firstly, there's been claims that the staff in Entebbe have been issued with letters telling them that your contracts are ending and the thing is shutting down. That's fake news.
Where did you hear that? Not here, but somewhere else.
Well, I'm very close to the journalistic circles in this country, so I follow the stories.
Yeah, but especially when you announce fake news being somewhere and you're on this very
that's
very medium.
That's
Some
not true.
people think that
Then
maybe
also, the story that has just come in, the one that Honorable Sechko is telling us, is also fake news. That, you know, the base that UN has taken a decision to keep it in Uganda is also fake news. What that does, it takes us away from the actual conversation we should be having. Firstly, this is not about moving the resource, the regional base, field support from Kampala to Nairobi. It's about a conversation in international politics where peacekeeping mission support is being debated. You need to go back and see, how did we come to have this base in the first place? There was a conversation starting, I think, 2008, over should we keep the global base in Italy? Because that's where the base was for the entire world, that wherever there are peacekeeping missions, it's Italy which provides both logistical support and IT support. So the debate was really combative, and they said, why don't we have at least a regional base in Africa, where, for example, 73% of conflicts are on the continent? Why 73% of the world conflicts then were in Africa. So there was competition over locating a base on the African continent. So firstly, UN passes the resolution to have a regional service center on the African continent. Then where should it be located? That was the other conversation. So there were so many places that were put forward. So the key competitors were Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. We touted Entebbe. Entebbe has been confirmed as the best place you can 36 all year you can fly in without any encumbrance. The place is good, the environment, access to Lake Victoria. So, you know, the debate was that this place is good. So the competition was over places. And Entebbe beat Lokocho, which Kenya had touted. Tanzania touted a place, I think, on Lake Tanganyika. And also, we beat all those three. But the competition was stiff. Now, within that time, the debate was, should we have a regional base on the African continent? Now, as that debate was ongoing, there was another debate. Should we just dismantle this idea of regional bases and have global service centers located in different parts of the continent? So there were 4 places that were suggested. There was Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, there were Mexico City, Nairobi, and what's the fourth? There were 4. Now Budapest, rather, Malaysia has been dropped. So that was the debate. So these debates were happening concurrently. At the same time when we signed the agreement to set up the regional base in Entebbe, the debate of having global
4 centers or 3
4 centers was also ongoing. So, you know, we ended up starting the base at Entebbe, businesses started, and we started doing business. Now, the beneficiaries, the conversation we should be having, who is behind, who is pushing the debate to create global service centers in these different locations? Now, if you have that, you realize that the pusher of the debate is the key beneficiary. And in this case, it is Nairobi. When you push that kind of debate, and so UN passed a resolution to make service centers obsolete, and so we have the language of global service centers. To make regional service centers obsolete, you move into the direction of global service centers. What that means is that you've not relocated this regional base. You've actually transformed the language of peacekeeping support from regional services to global service centers. Now, this is what we're missing in this conversation. Because if we get to this conversation at this level, we get to appreciate now who are the people advocating for a change in the ways in which peacekeeping missions are facilitated.
Joel, so who are those, do you think, if you agree, who are pushing for this kind of change? And what could be the factors behind it?
I don't know. I know that in general the UN is faced with, as I said, budgetary limits, and I think they're aware that they're not very efficient in their operations. So who would be pushing that? I do not know what particular countries would be behind it. Obviously, the U.S. is looking to cut back on its commitments to the UN generally. They've been very loud, and they're a very large financer of the UN. I don't know if they're behind this in particular. I don't have anything to add on that.
Well, you see, we also need to deal with the, in addition to the funding, first of all, the UN is restructuring even at the headquarters because they no longer have the luxury of a lot of money available to themselves. But let's see where we are going as a world. There was a time when British visas were being issued in Uganda. We were taken to Nairobi, we were taken to Addis. Now to get a British visa, it is issued in South Africa. The embassies are scaling down. If you go to the Schengen countries, you now go to 1 or 2, 3. They are trying to reduce the staff at most of their embassies. So that's what we must recognize. I think the Europeans and Americans no longer have capacity to keep a lot of staff at their various service centers. So if they are reducing staff at embassies and they are the ones who are funding UN, they can't allow UN to have a luxury of employing and opening up. Because at the moment, and that argument came in the debate that Honorable Sechikuo ignited in Parliament, that the UN will want to consolidate from, is it 47 to 504 centers?
Yes.
And that's why I want MPs that instead of crying that this base is being shifted to Nairobi, we must concentrate on making Uganda attractive. Because if you want to talk about Australia, visas are being issued in Nairobi. If you want to talk about Canada, you have to go to Nairobi.
Israel and all that.
Israel. So why is Nairobi attractive to all these countries and Uganda is not? For me, that's the point that I want to deal with. I don't want to begin crying because I said we must stop living and crying to attract sympathy. We must merit and attract people on our own merit. Rwanda started an airline. Airlines in Africa is almost everywhere from Ethiopia to Kechu to Rwanda. It's a loss-making business. But there are other advantages that come with operating an airline. The one who ate Uganda Airline is the chief diplomat from Sechikubo's district. And Sechikubo's motion in Parliament was, we must use all the diplomatic effort that we can marshal. And I want to ask Sechikubo, we are glad we have him. If your chief diplomat is a suspect and can't freely travel to Europe, can't freely travel to New York, who will lead this diplomatic push? That's the issue that we must deal with. I remember, yes, when we were calling over him, we said, can't we replace our human resource as a country?
You see, Patrick and viewers, I wouldn't really prefer that we take it in abstract. Whether there is global positioning and realignment, fine, let it be. But where is our country? Where is your country? Where is our country? The point I'm making, yes, taking into account Kenya's so-called comparative advantage than to Uganda. But and there are ways we can make our point. For instance, it's true the decision is based on diplomacy, on the economics involved, the UN cost cutting at the UN, and quality. But look, the considerations for Entebbe as a regional resource center. By the way, Entebbe is the one serving the entire Africa. It's not only for regional, say, East Africa or Central Africa, but the entire Africa. And look, considering the location of Uganda, where we have proximity to the region conflict-prone region, Central African Republic, DRC Congo, Burundi, South Sudan, Somalia, etc. We are really, we are at the forefront. We are now at the front line and quick access to those conflict regions. To that extent, whatever reasons we may advance, we naturally stand to be the one to house the regional resource center. Now, when it comes to the question of the diplomacy, that Honorable Semuju, and really he boldly stood in Parliament to say that we shouldn't be crying over it. Yes, we have to, because we have issues at stake. The employment of our people is at stake. People who have borrowed from banks, people who earn a living from this base, the suppliers, the service providers. Now, as a country, when you lose sight of that, we shall be losing sight of a bigger picture. That's why, as Uganda, we must do that first. Now, to the question of the Foreign Affairs Minister, he can bear me witness, Honorable Semuju, that when he was appointed, I was one of those who stood on the floor. He said, yes, fine and good, but he has issues. And as a matter of fact, we understand, even when he was the president of the UN General Assembly, issues were rising, came up, that he was the president, but at the same time he was owning the airport. There was insiders dealing.
Owning the airport, did you say?
There was that question of insiders dealing in regard to the Entebbe airport. And the UN was a bit an embarrassing situation. But having said that, all right, as bad as it may be, should we stand by and look on as a country? That's why we said, you, President Museveni, you are the one who appointed your team. It's your government. But we are also Ugandans. Do everything in your hands. Engage all the diplomatic channels. It's true, there is a handicap where you have a foreign affairs minister
Yes.
who may not enjoy reciprocity and welcome in those capitals, especially the UN.
Yusuf, have we
But
as a
can't we
country,
overcome that?
Yusuf, have we as a country soiled our image so bad that we cannot have a team of diplomats who can fight for our space and win it?
You know, let me answer that question this way. I think that the more we focus on our diplomats, we localize the situation. And I think by continuously localizing it, making it a local problem, the problem is with us. We're actually missing the gist of this conversation. It's not a local problem. The problem is not with us. The problem is in the language of international diplomacy. We need to first understand that and the ways in which the world is responding in terms of peacekeeping missions and support. There is a shift which you need to be aware of. There's a shift, and they keep pushers. Because let me tell you what's going to happen. Now, Guterres has been convinced that we need to go the direction of global service centers and forget regional service centers. Has been convinced. So what is going to happen within this month? He has to meet the committee, the budgetary committee of the UN, to present his position and convince them that this is the position we need to go. Now, after that, we'll have, I think in July, to go to the 5th committee in the UN General Assembly to debate on the matter. Should we drop regional service centers and move into the direction of global service centers? Now, this is where the game is being played. All right? I think I really agree that we have a problem with our diplomatic mission in New York. Maybe they're not doing really a fantastic job. I think I want to take that as
the other day, well, the president of the UN General Assembly was Ugandan.
Wait. You know, that's true, and I can show you.
But it takes a lot of lobbying and diplomatic effort
we need to
do
appreciate.
that.
A moment we appreciate that this is not a local problem. Rather, the game is at the very high level. We're able to know what is Kenya doing, for example, to push this language. What is Kenya doing? Why is Kenya presenting itself as the best beneficiary to have a global service center? Why is it pushing this language? Then we know that, first we need to appreciate that Kenya went into peacekeeping way before we did. All right? And I think we've done a fantastic job. I have a problem with the mission in Somalia. Yeah. I have a problem with missions in Central African Republic, in Sudan, in Rwanda, but I think we've done a fantastic job. That Uganda has presence in the region as a key player in peacekeeping missions. That you can't take away from this country and from this regime. We have so many problems with it, but that you can't take away from it. But in the politics of lobbying and peacekeeping missions and logistical support, Kenya has more experience. And now what they're doing, they are pushing the language to move it. Now we need to know, why is Kenya playing this kind of hostile politics? Because they lost at the first round. You know what Kenyans can do? They can say, we were flattered when the UN Secretary General suggested that we should have the Global Service Center. But I think Uganda has done a fantastic job. They're improving the infrastructure in Entebbe. The environment is still good. They've given us land for logistical training. You know, Kenya can do that.
But that can't be said
and the
by
conversion
Kenya.
can be.
No, that can't be said by Kenya.
Let me show you how they can do it.
Kenya
Our
can't-
diplomacy.
Kenya can't
Honorable,
pour praises onto you.
Let me make
country.
this point, Honorable.
It
If
can't.
our diplomacy is played at the regional level, because in the UN, groups, countries don't speak as countries, they speak as blocks. If the African bloc can present a united voice and say, well, we are happy with what Uganda is doing, because Uganda has been a major player on the continent. If we are able to send a team to Nairobi and convince Nairobi, can you drop this agenda? Because the battle is still ongoing. Can you drop the agenda of having you being the bigger beneficiary? Because if you realize in this conversation, Italy, which has had the global center before having the regional base move to Entebbe, Italy is silent in this conversation. So what happened? Why is Italy not saying, by the way, when you say you're creating global centers, you actually dismantle the base in Brindisi in Italy?
Okay.
Yes, let me wind this up. So we need to shift the ways in which we're looking at this conversation. Especially, we need to first understand the language. And this is the stuff I started with, that I'm really pained by the ways in which this story is being reported. We are so weak on details. We don't even appreciate the diplomatic language. We need to appreciate that this language of moving the regional base to Entebbe is not to Nairobi, is not what's actually happening. That should be the starting point. A moment to appreciate that. What is happening is international diplomacy has a long conversation over the ways in which they support peace missions. The first was a single global base in Italy. There was a small one in Valencia, rather in Sevilla, still in Spain. But there was one base. Then there was language. Should we create
But Patrick,
regional service centers?
Mr.
Now, that
Sengoma.
debate was successful. Let me finish. It was successful. Now the debate has moved on. Should we move away from regional service centers to global service
Yeah,
centers?
but can we have a global service center in Nairobi and the regional service centers that stay in Entebbe?
Exactly. We're going to have it, but it will be small. No, I'm telling you, we're going to have it, but it will be small.
But, Joel, in your view, where should the fight be taken?
Well, I think part of what he's saying makes some sense. We really need to consolidate regional support for ourselves. I think, especially if Kutesa is not able to visit the U.S. or Europe, we're really working with our hands tied behind our back. So we got to make use of where our team can go. Let's try to get the African countries behind us. If we're really in a political battle with Kenya, it's I think the most we could probably do with our current team. And I also agree with what he's saying, that we need to make the country more attractive and make the most of the opportunities that we do have. Maybe we should be making more out of the fact that we're doing all this peacekeeping all over the continent. Is there a way we can have that help our economy more? And maybe we need to get more creative about how our peacekeeping can foster our own economic development. I know that's pretty extreme.
For me, and that's why I opposed my friend Honorable Sechiku's motion, because the Honorable Sechiku outlined the benefits that you'll get when you're hosting a UN service center. And my own view is that these benefits are transferable. The same arguments you make for the UN should be the same arguments you make for NACOMAT. They should be the same arguments you make for banks scaling down, banks closing. Say that you don't continue and exacerbate your own vulnerabilities, that all the time you want to be helped. Please sympathize with us. We are the ones who send troops in Somalia. They know all this. We host so many refugees. They know it. But there's also a benefit that comes with hosting refugees, because UNHCR spends a lot of money here. I think where we are now, in fact, for me, this should be a catalyst. There is what we've not done right. Can we do it right, and such that in the future you are not undermined by your own colleagues? Because you see, the feeling among many Ugandans is that Kenya is backstabbing Uganda. We are the same people. Why do you go and plead for the same facility that we are hosting? And I recognize that there are people who are going to lose opportunities, the suppliers, and so on and so forth. But as a country, we must concentrate on making our country attractive. Ivory Coast was hosting ADB, but because they are unstable, ADB moved to Tunisia. He says that Uganda is more stable than Kenya. Kenya has changed leaders 4 times. For us, we are under one leader. I think the world must be worried. What will happen when that one leader goes the same way Gaddafi did, the same way Mubarak did? Because you can't be proud that for us we don't change leaders, we have one and therefore the country is stable. What will happen? We must begin thinking in the future, not in the present. So all these issues we need to address. The moment you make your country attractive, people will come. I even disagree with the president on issues of attracting investors. He thinks by, the other day we had Al-Warid here. He was flown around Kampala in the presidential chopper that is going to construct a hotel not very far from where we are. What did he do? He deployed people at Entebbe airport and said, this country doesn't attract traffic. You can't have a 5-star hotel in Kampala. Who will sleep in it? And therefore he went elsewhere. So these are the issues you must deal with as a country. You don't go pleading with UN, please help us, you know, for us, come, Nairobi has some. Make your country attractive. Rwanda is fighting. They have done a lot of publicity. I remember after the fighting in Kisangani, where we are now, Rwanda deployed the people to speak to every voice that matter in the UN. And you remember our president was quarreling when he stood up to give a speech. Because Rwanda, everybody now said, for Rwanda you can understand why they are in Congo. Uganda, there is no reason apart from aggression. And the president had the reasons, because he said we have ADF, we have so, and they are disturbing us. Why don't you understand? Then he went into quarreling. We don't prepare. The moment you have Sam Kutesa, who is a trader, and then you send him to go and do diplomat, eventually the results are as predictable as they should be. Get people whose job is to go and speak to others and convince them to go and do the talking for you. For us, these opportunities for our people. An NRM MP loses an election, go to New York. Another NRM MP loses an election, go and become second secretary. And now Sechikubo is moving a motion in the parliament that we need to marshal all the diplomatic efforts. So who will marshal it? Are you going to go and hire Kenyans?
Patrick, Honorable Semuju knows very well how we share deep sentiments about those matters. And they are really at our hearts. But I would like to point out, yes, those have been problems. But can we have them another day? The battle is now. That's why I would like to try to crystallize the debate. A shift in language, there is the international conversation, yes, but what is the reality? The reality we are talking about and why we are here is, look, the regional service center is being moved from Entebbe to Nairobi. Whether the language changes or not, that is the fact. And with it goes the advantages that have been accruing to our people as a result of the base being in Entebbe, but we are losing that. Number 3, we've had good actors, not a robust team at the international scene. But let's first weigh in on that. Let's deploy all our means. Now, once we bring back our base, once we bring back our resource center, then we can start the critique. The difference I'm having is, when Nairobi was busy lobbying for this, President Uhuru Kenyatta and Mr. Raila Odinga were speaking the same voice. And it's a fact. Yeah. Now, this is not the time to point fingers. Yes, you know it. I too would be having the greatest reservations when you talk about the foreign affairs minister, etc. But now he's an individual.
Okay.
He must step aside at some point in time.
Okay,
but we as a country, can't we, for the first time and read the last time if need be, put our heads together, put our efforts together, put good words, so that, and not sympathy, as Honorable is saying, we are not pleading for sympathy, but there are facts on the ground that we have sacrificed enormously in the name of pacifying Somalia, amongst other many reasons.
Okay, but before we take a break quickly, to Yusuf, as the UN realigns, do we have capability to at least bring the global center to Entebbe, because it has somewhere to start with? We already have a regional center, resource center.
That's a wonderful question, Kamara. And, you know, firstly, it's difficult for us to think we're going to compete with the Kenyan and win. All right? Because Kenya was first, Kenya has a big economy. It's difficult for us to imagine ourselves competing with Kenya and winning. The best we can do is called diplomacy, and this is diplomacy with Kenya. because Kenya is presenting itself as the beneficiary, as the pusher of the change in the twisted language. Now, if we are, when Honorable Samji says we need to make ourselves attractive, if the language makes ourselves attractive, we can't beat Kenya. It's miles ahead. But this is what we can do. If you revisit the conversation on how we beat Kenya and Tanzania to have the regional service base in Entebbe, we didn't compete with it. I remember I was speaking to our former PS at Foreign Affairs Ministry, Ambassador Mugume. He said he went on the flight, he took a flight to Nairobi and spoke to his counterpart. He said, why the fire? You guys have so much here. Why didn't you also give us a chance as we integrate as a regional common market and all this African community? Why didn't you also give us a chance to perfect the thing? So this type of diplomacy, Kenya called, the PS in Nairobi called New York and said, let Uganda take it. You see? So if we speak the language of making us attractive, that's a non-starter. Because if we are to go toe-to-toe with Kenya, we cannot win. But we can play diplomacy. And I think this is where we need to start thinking. That even when the time comes to implement the global service centers, we need to have this conversation with Kenya. Like, if we've made strides in making sure that the regional service center is really functional. Because if you ask yourselves, between 2010 and now, what has gone wrong with Entebbe? Nothing. This has nothing to do with the economy, by the way. Because if you speak about corruption in this country, the money that UN gives the regional base is not managed by this government. It's managed at the UN base. You see? So it has nothing to do with our economy. It is all about the UN itself. The report, for example, which they say has some loopholes about Uganda, was a report by the Administrative and Budgetary Committee of the UN. Now, that report was made by the experts of this committee about the next budget for the base for 2019. Now, it has been exploited, it's been manipulated to speak as if it's a report about Uganda. No, it's a report about the operations at the base.
Within the UN?
Within the UN. Because the money coming to the UN base, it comes to the base. It's managed at the base. Well, it trickles into the economy. But the administration of these monies is at the base. So if they make a bad report, it's about the base. And by the way, the base is mostly manned by expatriates. You see, all we've done is to give them grant to sit.
You see, the point Serun Kumar needs to understand, and I know he does, is the point he made. Even the forces in Somalia, at the beginning, each soldier was being paid 1,200. That money was slashed. You have had meetings in Kampala that money is further being slashed. So the international community does not have the money to maintain and continue offering the same services. And that's why they are hiring experts to go and make reports on how they can scale down on their operations and consolidate. Part of the reason they will move to Nairobi, apart from their robbing, you may accuse them of many other things, that they already have a lot of UN centers in Nairobi. There are facilities that each center will use and doesn't have to open up separate facilities. Those are available, being used by the centers in Nairobi. So if you want to consolidate, you don't go, because I had that argument in Parliament yesterday. Nairobi has this, why do they also want to take ours? The very reason they were giving in Parliament are the very reasons UN wants to go to Nairobi.
Remove redundancy.
Yeah, because they don't have money.
Gentlemen, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'll open the line so that we get to hear what Ugandans are saying about this intended move of shifting the UN Resource Center, Service Center from Entebbe to Nairobi, or creating the global bases, 4 global bases across the world. Welcome back. You're watching On the Spot. My name is Patrick Amara. My guests tonight are Honorable Theodore Sechikubo, Honorable Semuju Ibrahim Nganda, Mr. Yusuf Serunkuma, and Mr. Joel Bellinson. Now, I like how Yusuf has tried to explain about the shifting, the realignment of the UN, and of course, it seems it is also shrinking. The United States under Donald Trump is also telling you should, increase your contributions and pay what you're supposed to pay. So this shifting is likely to continue, Joel, and maybe it may not be in our hands we may not pull those strings so much.
Yeah, I think it is out of our hands largely, but I think what the gentleman from the university is saying has a lot of merit. we need to figure out how we can play diplomacy with Kenya directly. What's our carrot? What's our stick? I mean, if we want to think like Trump, you know, maybe we should be somehow making our pain and anger felt in Kenya. That if they're going to take away something very valuable to our economy, maybe there needs to be a...
What leverage do we have?
We could not buy their products.
So where do we buy them? So we begin importing them from Europe. It's going to be very expensive.
Really? We can't make any of our own?
Tanzania.
Or Tanzania?
Yeah.
Or make our own?
You mean you didn't know that Tanzania exists?
Kamara,
But I mean, I'm just saying, you know, you got to use all your tools. Carrot, stick. What do we have to offer them? Obviously, they're angry about the pipeline, right? Kenya's definitely not happy about how that worked out, and you know, I'm sure they have their list, and we have ours. Now, you know, do we have anything to trade with them that we can offer them, or pretty much we're out of things that they'd be interested in? In which case, then it comes down to, you know, what can we deprive them of that would make them feel enough pain to back down?
I know Kenyans
right?
are not as vindictive as Tanzanians. I know that for a fact.
No, that's not true.
That is true. I have dealt with all of them. If you went on our knees, the trouble would be for us wanting to size up with Kenya. That war will not win. But if we went on our knees, we went pleading, maybe Kenya will say, like they said last time, I had someone saying here, okay, you can have it. But if we want to go and compete with them, we will not beat Kenya. So the only solution now is to go and convince Kenya to pull out. If not, I don't see us winning. Because at the international level, there are many crimes we have committed as a country. I have heard everybody praising Uganda for contributing troops for the peace mission. But you forget that we have been a key player in most of these conflicts around us. You remember at one time we were in Kinshasa with Rwanda, overthrowing a government until we were beaten, and then we went fighting each other in Kisangani. This government in South Sudan, just recently the president said he was telling Europeans, I think when he went to speak at Commonwealth, that you are trying to preach to us as if all solutions must come from Brussels. There must be domestic African solutions. So we are part of the conflict in South Sudan. We are part of the conflict for many years. And I remember when the UN team of experts accused Uganda of supporting M23, we even threatened we can leave Somalia. We're behaving like a girl who is growing up. Oh, okay, boy, women will feel very bad. Because you see, you must not keep issuing threats and blackmailing others. You must know your own vulnerabilities and deal with them. The moment you fail, you're going to be disadvantaged and you think people don't like you. See, because why should I begrudge Kenya? We had an airline functioning when Idi Amin was the president. You can imagine when Idi Amin was the president, you had a functioning airline. And 32 years of a government of graduates, including PhD holders, you don't even have one aircraft. Even the one you have, Uganda Air Cargo, the aircrafts they are flying to Congo and Somalia are not airworthy. And this is the government in this century. Let's deal with our vulnerabilities first. At least, I mean, you see Rwanda struggling. Rwanda is a small economy. But they have been all over the world selling Kigali as the best capital in Africa. And some people have believed it. The other day we had an argument in Parliament when we are discussing tourism. We have the highest population of gorillas in Uganda. But people continue going to Rwanda. We nearly have 40%. Rwanda and Congo share, I think, 60, or vice versa. We may have 60 and they have 40. But people think there are more gorillas in Rwanda because they have done a very good campaign. For us here, you are every day buying tear gas to tear gas. If SG and he speaks, he says, Honorable Suchuku wants us to speak the same language. He says Raila Odinga and Uhuru Kenyatta speak the same language. Yes, Raila Odinga went swear in as a people's president, was never arrested. But here, SG for 3 months is in jail. The way you treat your own people, other people are seeing. It's like visiting your home, you've been beating your wife and now you have swept the compound, you're saying, welcome here, it is peaceful, but they see wounds all over the body. We can't hide. Let's first sort out our house first. First, deploy the right human resource to do our work. When we have deployed the right human resource, and then we must have good relationship with our neighbors. They must trust us. The moment you are mistrusted by your own people, we're talking about, before you came here, then about Sechikubo, how we disadvantaged the Kenyan Minister of Foreign Affairs. She was also competing for an international